that those substances are part of the filled tubes. And when we first looked at this, we didn't think that when we recognized they could be whole, we didn't think that these guys actually filled them. We thought they maybe did some kind of a blind test just to see if the electrospinning works from whatever source this was sprayed from. But when we were able to actually extract, we were actually completely shocked that they were not a blind test. This was an absolute targeted application. So from that, I would like to get Dr. Anna now. You have access to the sheets that you want to share with us, because I like to go into with the people that are shocked, they're afraid, they're in panic now. Could you share with us a little bit of your findings of your research with your colleagues and your research team? Also, Marvin, you're invited to participate here. This is you guys' part. I know you both work extremely well together. You're trusted, alliances. Dr. Anna, please come out and tell us what you have found out.
Absolutely. Let me just share my screen here. So my concern as a researcher is about the findings of the human blood. I look at dark field microscopy of live blood samples. And since in the post-COVID era, there have been an enormous amount of polymer filaments that have been found. And I started correlating that with the research of Clifford Carnicom, for example, who for 30 years also found more gallons from geoengineering. And what happened is I'm showing here filament in unvaccinated blood, and you see exactly what you showed. There is a hollowness inside of it that looks like the fiber is actually a delivery device for something. And here on the other side, what you can see is a Morgellons filament that was isolated by Clifford Carnicom within decades ago. So what we did was many different research aspects as to what happened to humanity's blood. This is unvaccinated blood. We applied a low-level electrical current in 2 hours. These filaments were growing because they're actually self-assembling within the blood. What we then found, we did near-infrared spectroscopy on the isolated filaments from the human blood, and found very similar chemical signatures to what was presented. So what you can see is a lot of halogens. We did find vinyl alcohol, polyamides, polyinserts, polyethylene, polyethylenes and polyethylene glycols, silicone, sulfur. And so the concern is what exactly is happening to the blood. This was a study that we did on near-infrared spectroscopy of COVID-19 vaccinated and unvaccinated blood. And again, we found the methyl groups, the polyins, polyamides, and amide polymers. So we were quite concerned about it. And then we wanted to see historically, how does that correlate with these filaments? And so, for example, this was an environmental filament testing project, similar fibers like you had, but this happened in 2010, and this was the metals that were found, very similar context. Aluminum was the highest one, titanium, vanadium, zinc. And so Renette had sent me some of the spider filaments. I also looked at those under the microscope, and some of the fiber aspects certainly look similar to what we see in the blood. I correlated this also with the microplastics literature, because the microplastics have been now found even in Antarctica, and the signatures, for example, are very similar to what is now being found in human tissues. So, for example, this recent study of the human brain, a plastic tablespoonful of microplastics in the human brain in autopsy found with polyamides, nylon, polypropylene, and the question is, where is this all coming from? The scientists are saying it's degradation products from plastics. However, if you look also at the geoengineering patents that also discuss polyethylene, for example, as weather modification polymers, there's also overlap there. Dr. Hildegard Staninger, with whom I very closely work, toxicologist and advanced nanotechnologist, she analyzed the Morgellons fibers as well as the polymers that were within people that were also self-assembling nanotechnology and microchips, and there was a lot of chemical overlap. She also found polyamides and polyethylene. I am a certified chelation practitioner. I pull out heavy metals out of people, and what I want to show here is Dr. Herndon. He wrote many research articles about the coal fly ash, and it was found that when it was put in distilled water, the 38 elements were actually within the particular toxic metals: aluminum, antimony, arsenic, barium, beryllium, cadmium, lead, mercury, nickel, thallium, and uranium. So if you see what I pull out of people, you can see exactly that: extremely high level of aluminum, antimony, arsenic, barium, beryllium, lead, uranium, and all of these metals are synergistically toxic. They cause accelerated aging, they're carcinogenic, they cause heart disease, arteriosclerosis, dementia, every aspect of endocrine disruption, and people are experiencing accelerated aging and turbo cancers, which is not just due to the deployment of the COVID-19 biological weapons, but also in my mind, to what we are inhaling on a daily basis, including all of the chemicals and unregistered chemicals that Hans-Jörg just discussed. We also did analysis of blood of wild animals. This is the blood of a squirrel. And you can see that there is the same polymer filaments that you can find in human blood are there. So that clearly indicates that there is something that's being sprayed that's affecting all of wildlife. This is venison blood, and you can see the same polymer filaments from a deer, close to my backyard that somebody had taken care of. This is an example of what happens to humans when they consume this kind of contaminated animals. So these were grass-fed beef sample, 3 of them that I looked at, of an unvaccinated beef, and they had all of these different polymers in there, and the owner that had butchered them to use for the family for food was on a carnivore diet, and this is his blood, and in terms of the polymers and how they are actually destroying the blood and replacing it with polymers. I have done experiments of, if you just draw 30 milliliters of blood now, even of unvaccinated people, and let it sit overnight, there is a polymer, plastic, rubbery-like material that develops. And this is a rainwater analysis microscopy. You can see these purple filaments, and this is what I see in human blood. Nothing in the human blood should be purple or neon pink. And so my question as a doctor is the danger for humanity, the fact that we are all contaminated, that we're inhaling this stuff, that this is causing illness. It's a depopulation weapon, and that it needs to be addressed as an immediate public health threat and further evaluated. And I also want to say that there was a study in 2012, a French analysis of similar filaments. They found DHP, endocrine disruptors, endocrine challenges and disruption are seen now ubiquitous in so many people, and they found many others, toxic synthetic compounds within it. So this has been going on for a long time, and people need to take it serious. And with this, I'll turn it over to Dr. Herndon.
You have to unmute yourself.
Ooh, there.
Okay. There we go. Excellent.
Well, there's even more of a problem than Anna is mentioning. The infection or infestation of the body from these aerosols, it's more than just the fibers, coal fly ash, for example, is composed mostly of spheres. There's a researcher in England, a Dr. Barbara Maher, who studied the brains of people who have died of Alzheimer's. And what she found was that there were crystalline magnetite. Magnetite is Fe3O4. She found crystalline magnetite, which is produced in the body, but in the brains. But she also found spherical magnetite, which comes from outside, which is characteristic of the fly ash. So what we're breathing, it comes every possible way into our body, through our eyes, through our skin, through our ingestion, and it's just about everything that's toxic. And we're in a real problem. Now, the question is, why are they doing this? This was over a period of about 10 years, publishing scientific articles, mostly about chemtrails and the medical effects of them. Frequently, editors and reviewers would ask one question: what is the legality? How is it that this is occurring in Switzerland, in the US, in Canada, in Australia, and other places, and no one will say anything? What is the legal basis? And then one day I discovered, someone mentioned INMOD, which is an international treaty called the Convention on the Prohibition of Military or Hostile Use of Environmental Modification Techniques. Well, by the name, that's something anyone could sign on. And in fact, it was entered into force in 1998 and now has something like, I want to say more than 90 countries are signatories to that. Well, it's one of the few conventions or international treaties that is not quite described accurately. Most treaties, the title says exactly what the treaty is about. This is an exception. The convention does not prohibit the use of environmental modification techniques. It sounds like it. The first article says something to the effect that signatories will endeavor not to. Well, that has no teeth. If they wanted to prohibit, they would say, shall not. But then the rest of the treaty, the second article, is a definition of environmental modification that I don't think anybody on this panel could make any broader. It even includes outer space and biota, which we're biota. Then the third article begins the real source. It's in very confusing language, but it and uses the word shall, and its signatories shall participate to the most possible viewed activity to participate in peaceful environmental modification. Now, what is peaceful modification? It's, well, you could fertilize a garden with it. There's no such thing. Any large-scale environmental activity is not peaceful. But that's what this treaty is forcing countries, signatories, to participate in. Now, because in Michigan there was a dropping of material from an aircraft, that I got access to the people, the records, the articles, the Michigan Environmental Services, and what all this appears to be is little droplets of plant material mixed with salt, mixed with coal fly ash, and some kind of a binder. It's like cryoconite particles, debris that sits on a glacier and melts its way in. So it's very clear that the peaceful purpose is to melt Arctic ice. But that's a subterfuge. That's an excuse for are countries to allow this to happen, but they're doing a lot more. Up until about a year and a half ago, I lived in San Diego, California, for many years. And I watched the jet planes spraying chemtrails almost every day up and down the coast. And when rain was expected, water in California comes from the Pacific Ocean. And chemtrails desiccate the air, and they heat the air and prevent the inflow of moisture from the Pacific. And when the news would announce that we're expecting rain in a few days, the planes would multiply. They'd be out there to force that water not to come in. So we had decades, more than a decade of desiccation. And if you've watched the news over the last few months, you've seen Los Angeles and San Diego and a whole bunch of California burning up. Well, Mark Whiteside, my physician colleague, and I published a paper in 2018 about California wildfires and the cause of it and the desiccation that's being forced upon it. This has nothing to do with melting Arctic ice, except it does contribute to global warming. But what it is really is environmental warfare on human populations. And this is the subterfuge is melt Arctic ice, but the reality is environmental warfare. And as far as preventing this, first of all, everything's done in secret. And nobody had beforehand really understood where it comes from, because everybody gets benefits. The military, for example, gets benefits from it, and they can use it to engineer storms or cause drought on enemies or whatever. But it wasn't clear just who had the authority. But the authority comes from this international treaty. In the United States, the U.S. State Department is responsible for U.S. treaties. So that's the doorway, the entrance for just about every endeavor that it could be classified as environmental warfare. It begins in the U.S. State Department, and that's where we really need to address our issues. And every other country that's a signatory power has the equivalent of a State Department that handles that. Now, you often hear the phrase in the U.S. that federal laws supersede state laws. Well, in this instance, an international treaty supersedes federal laws if that treaty is allowed to progress via the State Department. So this is a fairly new approach, and I think that's where a lot of focus needs to be in terms of the individual countries, because this read the treaty, read it as if it's a contract. I mean, I was very sensitive to this because some of the consulting that I've done in the past, I've always written my own contracts, so I got the sense of contract law and the need to use words that are precise.
Yeah.
Like shall, for example, means you got to do it, whereas endeavor not to doesn't mean anything. And the people have been tricked. I doubt if any of the signatories ever read this with thoroughness. And in fact, I've seen people who write legal opinions and analyses that this goes right over their head. I mean, this was a cleverly done document, but it's an evil document. But this is the legal basis.
Excellent, Marvin. I'm going to just expand here a little bit. The Swiss government, what we showed here the slides which you showed about that in Article 3, the Swiss government signed onto this treaty from the UN, which they started this treaty in 1976, and the Swiss government signed onto it in 1988. So 12 years later, the Swiss government signed onto it. So I guess for anyone that's viewing this, let's make sure that every one of you can research this in your own country when your country signed on to this treaty. So this is the legal basis, and this is exactly what I personally included in my claim against the federal council member. Okay, so that is very, very specific right there, because we now have the evidence with the lab analysis that they are not doing it for peaceful purposes. And that's exactly why we are all so excited on this panel, because these 22 months in a lab allowed us to get us the absolute fundamental basis for this legal claim against these perpetrators, because now we can actually have the evidence showing that they're not doing it for legal purposes. Marvin, would you like to say anything else? But for sure, I'd like to give Renette the word again, because that, as your former politician and mayor, those are some serious things now, and the knowing who is responsible. If you say it's the State Department, we need to focus on the actual, absolutely responsible party here.
Well, I just filed a formal whistleblower complaint with the Inspector General of the U.S. Department of State. Now, I don't intend to just leave it there, because what it really needs to do is to get to President Trump and Elon Musk and his team, because you could think of the State Department as a portal for all of the geoengineering that's taking place. It's all secret. Well, graphically, at one point I thought, well, it's like the head of an octopus with all the tentacles. And I thought, no, that's a terrible analogy, because octopi are very intelligent and they're nice creatures. A more appropriate representation would be the head of Medusa, with snakes going out through all the departments and so forth. And I suspect that if Elon Musk and his team, his Doge team, gets into the computers, they will discover massive amounts of fraud that's being used to pay for this and to enrich the people who are at the bottom of it. And I think that's hopefully what will be happening.
We've had dialogue before, Marvin, and I'm so glad you bring this out. I wasn't sure if you're going to bring this out, but I am so glad that all the listeners that are on here with us are getting this. This is so massive, significant. Renette, I'd like for you to say a few words here. I'm sure you're ready here, loaded, ready to go.
Well, as I said before, as a former elected official, when people come to us with problems, generally you're elected and appointed officials, the agencies won't do anything unless you also present the solutions. And while we don't have the State Department included in this, we certainly can throw them into this open letter. So this is what I suggest people understand. These are the changes we're looking for right now to uphold the national security interests of the United States, of course Europe as well, and protect the health of its citizens. We demand the following: a full-scale federal investigation into the source, composition, and purpose of these airborne filaments, immediate coordination between the Department of Defense, EPA, and the HHS to conduct independent testing and risk assessments, an immediate halt to any classified or experimental military activities involving atmospheric dispersal of chemical, biological, or nanotechnological materials over U.S. territory, congressional hearings to examine the evidence, investigate potential violations of federal law, and uphold responsible parties accountable. Public disclosure of all existing government data on atmospheric testing, geoengineering, and potential foreign or domestic threats related to these toxic materials. and full enforcement of the 15 USC Chapter 9A to ensure that no undisclosed weather modification activities are occurring in violation of U.S. law. And then lastly, immediate enforcement of 50 USC 1520A to not only investigate but also terminate any and all illegal biological or chemical experimentation on American citizens, ensuring full accountability for any agency, contractor, or foreign entity involved. So essentially, in conclusion, we're saying it's a present reality, that this is not theoretical. You've proven that. Our skies have been weaponized. Again, this is not a conspiracy, and it is actually a moral obligation to protect the American people from covert and unauthorized threats, foreign or domestic. And so we are asking for immediate, decisive action. This is an open letter. It is available on your platform, Christian, as you know, for people to take. It's available on my Substack, RenetteSenumsFoghornExpress.substack.com, also SaveOurSkies.org. You can take whatever pieces you want. You can take this letter, send it to your officials as well. We have the format for the whole entire world to use to their disposal.
Thank you so much, Renette. Fantastic. I think we all will put our heads together some more. We will, outline the action plan, almost like a checklist in how every single one that's viewing this, what action they can actually take. So with this, we're going to go into the next and involve some of these trusted people that follow our information. From these 500 seats, all the 500 seats in our live webinar, we had registrations from out of 37 countries. All yours.
Yep, thank you. Start. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that's actually my part still.
Yeah, that's your part. You can.
That's great. Well, for anyone here on the webinar tonight that hasn't seen those strings, here's something. A few images. You can see it's a really sticky thing here on the hand as well. So we have a lot more. Here are actually the samples that came in from all over of Europe that I have then accumulated and obviously made notes of and then sent it to the lab team. So Hans-Jörg received all sorts of labs, of samples. You can see most of them, I asked them to put it in glass jars so we don't cross-contaminate them with plastic and stuff. So we had the most interesting packages that were shipped to us. But here's a video that I'm going to actually play with you. This is sent to us from Germany, our dear friend from Germany, Mark. I know you can't hear the sound, but you can see those strings. This is nothing like from a spider. But we have one more here. He's going to take it in his hand. You can see in his hand, the behavior in his hand is very strange. So they're just kind of blowing the wind here, and now he's touching it with his hand. Very famous hand, Mark, I know. Yeah, it's funny. So now, just about there. So anyway, this is just what the human eye can see. And now we're going to hear from Hans-Jörg. He's going to tell us what he's seen under the microscope and all these tools.
Okay. So that's, as you already said, a condensed version of the complete analytics. I let all the, let's say, machines, instruments aside. I do not tell how they work. I simply focus on the results, and I bring you the appropriate spectra and things which are play a major role in the findings we have. And this is the first one. We clearly have seen that the material, the polymer which plays around the webs, the mysterious threads, are not made from a commercial available, from a technical polyamide. It's made from polyamides from amino acids, probably including with their derivatives, and never from a plastic like PET or PE or PP. Then we made the elemental analysis, and clearly we found that what is expected for polyamides is carbon, hydrogen, naturally nitrogen, and we found also some sulfur, which came internally to the conclusion that there must probably an amino acid based on cysteine formulated. We also detected metals. Most of them were in the upper range, but we have little evaluated value on aluminum. Then we could demonstrate by scanning electron microscopy that the fibers had an outer diameter of approximately 4 to 6 micrometers, corresponds to 4,000 to 6,000 nanometers, and they are all hollow inside. Diameter approximately 1 or 2 to 3 micrometers. And together with optical microscope, we saw that they are inside whole, have cavities, which are probably filled with material. And that came me to the next step, because if there's something inside, we thought we can extract it. And I did extraction with pure solvents, organic solvents, 99.99 purity. And what came out was later on analyzed with FTIR, GCMS, and we got a very broad range of chemicals which are saturated, unsaturated, cyclic, monomeric, aromatic hydrocarbons, including benzene derivatives, ketones, and so on. And starting research about the toxicity of these substances, and we found the GHS hazard labeling. That means Global Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals, which is a worldwide standard for every chemical which is registered. And then we got answers like highly flammable, caused hazardous, corrosive, highly toxic, and so on. Next slide, please. This is an overview, short overview of the GHS labeling. You see always the red rhombus, which is filled with a sign about the toxicity or about the warning or danger. And you see it range from highly toxic, means the skull. Is there corrosive, can attack your hands, can attack your skin, can attack every surface. It's harmful to health, even maybe can cause cancer. It's hazardous to water, it attacks maybe aquatic organisms like fish or insects, and it's highly flammable. And what is astonishing at the research level, when we got all these pictograms, was that some of the substances are even not registered. That means maybe they are really new research products, never registered, never put in a patent, or they are made from a company and they don't want to tell the other people what they have done. Next slide, please. This is one of the first thread 347 I got from Christian. That's the FTIR, and you may see a curve with we call that absorption bands, curves with numbers on top. That's the labeling of the wave number. And regarding as a spectroscopist these figures, you can clearly say, well, that must be a polyamino amide or an amide, because the two major bands you see in the middle, around 6000 and 5000, are typical for such substances, and they're the only and indicative proof that this substance is there and is not anything else. Next slide, please. And then, because Christian declared already, the first analysis was given to a lab, and the finding was it's polyamide. It's a natural polyamide type nylon. And then I did believe that, because if I look at the figures and you see now all the forms is different in the so-called alkyl vibration region. It's bigger, it's stronger, and if you compare it, next slide please, in the so-called fingerprint region, you see the details. Historically, the names for these bands were given AMID 1, 2, 3, up and 4 and so on. And compare now please the two figures, the curves. The one is the red one from our thread, and the other ones were the commercial available polyamides called polyamide 6, nylon 6,6, polyamide 12, polyamide 6, 12, 11, and so on. The numbers is the indication which monomers has been used to make a polymerization with these monomers. 6,6 means we have two monomers with 6 carbon atoms condensed together to build a nylon or a polyamide. Next slide, please. Then we make naturally data bank research in a huge IR data bank, and we got a lot of hits. The best ones are always some which are very close to, let's say, an amino acid polymer based on natural amino acids. One is the spun silk, and the silk material of the cocoon, maybe you know it, consists mainly of fibrine, and fibrine is made with 3 amino acids. That declares we saw these because these two curves are very identical. If you look at, especially at the numbers around 1600, you have as well in both little peaks inside, which is typical for formation of several amino acids which are condensed together to build a polymer. Next one. Another proof to get out what it is was to use pyrolysis gas chromatography coupled to mass spectrometry. The trick behind this is in a very short time, that means milliseconds, the product, the sample in that case, the thread is pyrolyzed, is thermally destroyed, and then separated about the pollen. And here it builds, you may see many peaks, many single lines, regular distance, with no further information. And then we did the same with the thread. Next slide, please. And you see now the difference. Remember the first pattern. Many peaks, one besides the next. And this one gives only one single peak. The nylon 6 is made from caprolactam, and by pyrolysis GCMS investigations, the monomer is cracked down or the polymer is cracked down to the monomer and can be identified as caprolactam. And all the technical and commercially available polyamides have 1 or 2 or 3 monomers, and by using pyrolysis you always get these monomers back. Sometimes it's the original version, sometimes it's, for example, a nitrile instead for an amine. So we have a clear proof, two things, FTIR, GCMS, pyrolysis GCMS, which clearly say it's not nylon, it's amino acid. Next slide, please. Here's an overview of all the different threads we got from locations where people collected it. You see the name, Dietlikon, Linwil, Riedwil, Krappenwinning, all small towns in Switzerland. And if you look at the curves, and the red one is always the first sample, we got 347, they all look similar. They have all these peaks on the top of the amide 1 or amide 2 band. So we are sure this material spread from the sky is always the same. Next slide, please. We came to the elemental analysis. Left-hand side, you see the organic elements, and it's clearly to expect that the nitrogen amount is relatively high, and the sulfur amount is 0.2, which speaks, as I already said, maybe amino acid cysteine has been used. In the next rectangle, you see all the elements we have checked. And aluminum is slightly higher. We have also some iron, but iron is not toxic. And we have, interesting-wise, magnesium, all with 300 ppm. And in the rectangle right down, blue, we have checked all the other elements of the periodic system, and you may see they are all below 5 ppm. Next slide. This is the first picture we made with my optical microscopy. You used embedding material paraffin wax, and then with a rotary microtome instrument, we cutted slices for slices till we reached positions where we clearly can see the fibers. And you may see already in the picture 11A that they are hollow inside, but in the picture 11B you can clearly see that is, besides it's hollow, we have a coloration. And the coloration brought us to the idea they must be filled. There must be something inside. Next slide, please. This is a picture taken with the scanning electron microscope. Left-hand side, you see these fibers were relatively single, sometimes a little bit bundled together, but mostly single. On the right side, there's a strange thing. I'm assuming the so-called spinning process, that is the electrospinning process, is not completely perfect, or even they had some problems by spraying it out, because all the fibers were sticked together. You see a flat, a complete area where all the fibers are stick together. Some are going out, some are staying inside. Next slide, please. Then we made the preparation. The picture you see are both from the observation room of a scanning electron microscope. And for this experiment, and this was really the final clue, we first used a completely different embedding material. We formed a prism, which were with a rotary instrument, slice by slice comes down. And we got very good surfaces, perfectly cutted, because this time we used a diamond cutter. The first experiment, normally with a cutter on a rotary microtome tool, is made from steel, but steel is not sharp enough. So always the fibers were very sensitive, broke and not glad to cut. So we used this time a diamond cutter and got excellent cuts. The red points, 2 points on the left side, is the pen marker, because we have to look where are the fibers embedded and how did we cut it. On the right side, you see the same picture, but this time we used a black marker to identify the location, the position where the fibers were cutted. Next slide. And these are the, let's say, the final confirmation that the fibers are hollow inside. The white spots are from the marker, but there are enough, let's say, fibers remaining, and everybody can see they are open inside. Even some are like the cursor is at the moment, some are looking like material comes out to the cutting, it looks like a chunk coming out. And that was another proof that the material is inside. Maybe not all fibers are filled, that is possible. I don't know how the process really runs, the spinning process and filling process, but you see most of them are absolutely hollow, have cavities, and many of them are filled. And go to the right picture, right side, there is in the middle one fiber lengthwise cut it, and you see that it's hollow inside. And here are, this one, here are some diameters that we see again. The inner diameter is roughly 3 micrometers, and the outer diameter is around 4 to 5 micrometers. Next picture, please. And then we had, lucky-wise, found one place where the cut horizontally was perfect. And then the 6,000 magnification clearly showed that inside this fiber is material. It's clearly cutted, it is filled, and that is clear that we said now we have to do extraction. But now comes the patent situation. It's up to you, Phil, to explain what is the background? Next slide up.
Okay, maybe first of all, of course, this topic that we discussed tonight is a very, very narrow topic.